Here I have a simple top-down tower defense map. We need a sprite object. This will be a silhouette. Every time we click the tower button, this silhouette will pop out and follow our cursor, to indicate that we are ready to place a tower. Next, create an empty game object called Game Manager. This empty game object will hold our scripts. Also, I have set up a simple UI. So I have a panel with 3 buttons on it. Each button represents a different tower. Also, you should create a prefab for each tower. These towers are only sprites. To create these prefabs, simply create a sprite on the hierarchy, and assign a sprite. And drag and drop the game object inside your prefab folder. And now you have created your prefab. Next, create 2 scripts called Object Pooling and Spawn Tower. Open your Object Pooling script. In this script, we will instantiate towers when the game started, so we can just enable them when we need them. The first thing we need is a public static variable, and name it instance. This variable lets us access public variables and public functions of this script to other scripts. Next, declare a serialized field int variable, called amount to pool. This will determine how much we will instantiate for each tower. Next, declare a serialized field array game object variable, called tower to pool. This is where we will assign the prefab that we created a while ago. And lastly, declare a list of game objects called tower pooled. This variable will hold all the instantiate game objects. Now, on the awake function, put instance is equal to this. This line is simply assigning the object pooling script to the variable instance. Next, on the start function, first let's declare a new list of game object. Now we will instantiate our towers. First, create a for loop for the towers. This for loop will go through each tower prefab that we will assign later. Add another for loop. This time this will loop depending on the value of amount to pool variable. Next, inside the second for loop, create a local game object variable called temp, TMP in short, equals instantiate, tower to pool, with the I as the index. This line is where we instantiate our tower prefab. And the temp variable will hold the current instantiate tower. Next, disable the instantiate game object. Then add the instantiate game object to the list variable. Next, create a function called getTower1Pooled. With an array game object as a return value, in this function, we only want to return all tower 1 that we instantiate. Inside the function, first we will declare a local array game object variable. I will just name this T1. And the length will depend on the value of the amount to pool variable. Next is the for loop. Assign amount to pool variable. As a condition, as long as the I variable is less than the amount to pool, then we continue the loop. Inside the for loop, we simply add a tower game object to the T1 array. And after we get all tower 1, then we just need to return the array of tower 1. Copy and paste getTower1Pooled function, and rename it as getTower2Pooled. This time we will return all tower 2 in the list. The only thing we have to change is the index for the tower pooled list. This time we want to start from the value of amount to pool. To visualize what's happening here, for example, if the amount to pool variable has a value of 3, then the tower pooled list should look like this. In the first loop, I is 0. 0 is less than 3, south the loop should continue. Now we will assign an item to the T2 array from the tower pooled list. In the tower pooled list, we added amount to pool to I. So 0 plus 3 is equals to 3. This means, we are getting the item from index 3 from the list, and add it to the T2 array. Then the second loop is the same. The I variable will increment. 1 is less than 3, then the loop continues. And for the index 1 of T2, it should be equals to tower pooled index 4. Because the value of I is 1, so 1 3 is 4. We are adding tower pooled index 4 to T2 index 1. Then for the third loop, it will be the same. Index 5 of tower pooled will go to index 2 of T2. For the fourth loop, I is now equals to 3, and 3 is not less than 3, so the loop will stop from here, and now this is our final array value for T2. And again, copy and paste getTower1 pooled function, and rename it as getTower3 pooled. This time we will return all tower 3 in the list. The only thing we have to change is the index for the tower pooled list. This time we want to start from the value of amount to pool times 2. And that is all for the object pooling script. Next, open spawn tower script. First thing we need is an array of sprites, called tower sprites. Also declare a variable for a sprite renderer, called tower silhouette. In the start function, remove the sprite from the sprite renderer, so we don't see the tower silhouette at the start of the game. Now create a function called tower silhouette position. In this function, we want the tower silhouette to follow our cursor. Inside the function, declare a vector2 local variable called cursor location, and this should be equals to the input.mouse position. Next, we have to convert the cursor location to a world position, because right now the cursor location is using the screen position. To do that, declare another vector2 local variable called cursor world position, and this should be equals to the camera.main.screen to world point, and put the cursor location in the parameter. Now, assign the cursor world position variable in the transform position of tower silhouette game object. After that, don't forget to call this function in the update function. Also, add another variable, this time it's a private array game object called tower to spawn. Next, create another function called pickTower, with a parameter integer called tower number. This is the function that we will call every time we click one of the tower buttons. Inside this function, first assign a sprite to the tower silhouette. Like I said a while ago, tower silhouette is our indicator for the players that they are ready to place a turret on the map. Also in this function, is where we retrieve an array of towers from the object pool script. To do this, we need to have multiple if statements. If tower number is equals to 0, then we will get tower 1 array. If tower number is equals to 1, then we will get tower 2 array. If tower number is equals to 2, then we will get tower 3 array. And so on. If you have more than 3 towers, then you just have to keep adding an if-else statement. Next, create another function called addTower. This function will add a tower to the map of our game. Then make sure you also add this function to the update function. Now back to the addTower function, first add an if statement. We need to check whether the tower silhouette have any sprite. Next, add another if statement, this time we will check if the player press the left mouse button. Then, add a for loop with the length of tower to spawn in the condition. Next, add an if statement, this if statement will check if the tower is not enabled in the scene. If the tower is not active, then it means it's available to be placed in the map. Inside the if statement, all we need to do is enable the tower. Change the position equal to the position of the silhouette. Also remove the sprite from the silhouette. And lastly, add a break statement. Break statement is used to stop a loop from continuing the loop. This means once we get a tower place in the map, then there is no need to continue the loop, since we already got what we needed. We are done with all the script. Now we can set up the scene. First, go to your empty game object, and add both object pooling, and spawn tower script. Let's start with the object pooling. First put a value on the amount to pool variable, for example 5. Also lock the inspector, this will make it easier to assign array variables. Now, let's add our prefab in the tower to pool array variable. Simply select all tower prefab, and drag and drop them in tower to pool. Next, in the spawn tower script, let's assign the tower sprites. Go to the sprite folder and select all tower sprite. Then drag and drop them in tower sprites array variable. And lastly, assign the tower silhouette game object to the tower silhouette variable. We also need to set up our UI. Each button represent a tower, and each button need an onClick event. To do that, select a button. I will start with the cannon tower. But first unlock the inspector, so we can see the button settings. Scroll down until you see the onClick, and click on the small plus button to add an event, and assign the game object that holds your spawn tower script. Then click No function, then spawn tower and choose the pick tower function. Next, assign a value of 0 to the parameter, since our code we start with 0. Select the next tower button, click on the small plus button to add an event, and assign the game object that holds your spawn tower script. Then click No function, then spawn tower and choose the pick tower function. Next, assign a value of 1 to the parameter. Do the same thing with the other tower buttons, with a different value to the parameter. And we are done. If we click a tower button, the silhouette should pop out, which means we can now add a tower in the map. Just click anywhere in the map, and a tower should be placed. Of course you want to limit where the player can place their tower. Normally on tower defense games you can't add towers on the path where enemies will walk through. Also you may want to limit the amount of tower, based on how much you pooled. I will show you how to do that in the next video. So click subscribe to get notified whenever I post a video. But for now this is all for this video. Thank you for watching.